Welcome to the last panel discussion of the user track. So very happy today to welcome our two invitees. I hope you'll be three because Melissa from Jersey City is going to join. For the moment, I think she has some technical issues, so fingers crossed. Today we are here to speak about data stories. Of course, we speak in a perspective of data sharing, so it's not data stories for themselves, but data stories to engage the communities. I'm Sylvain, Ornetti, Customer Success Manager for Opendatasoft for North America. So in a word, I'm helping our clients develop their data usages with the solution. And guys, I will let you introduce yourself. We can start maybe with you, Jess.
Sure. My name is Jess Rogers. I work for the City of Kingston here in Ontario, Canada. My position is that of data architect, and I'm also sort of the sole person responsible for the Open Data Kingston, as we call it, our Opendatasoft platform.
And I am Leith Britt. I work for the town of Cary in Cary, North Carolina. We're located just outside of Raleigh, which is the capital. My title is IT Platform Developer. I work mainly in GIS, Geographic Information Systems, but also dabble in databases and was part of the team that started our open data efforts at the town, as well as I'm currently kind of taking over the helm of that. We just had a staff member leave, so I've stepped in to keep that effort going temporarily or maybe permanently. So thank you.
That's perfect. Just introducing maybe quickly Melissa from Jersey City. So she's supposed to join the session if we solve our technical problems. Melissa is Open Data Manager for Jersey City, a city located in New Jersey, and she's responsible for the Open Data program. So let's start with the first question. So again, we will talk about data stories and more specifically about your data stories projects. So which challenges, opportunities you had to overcome when running these projects. But before that, I think it's necessary to get back a little bit in the past and to talk about your open data projects and your portals. And actually, when and how did you launch your portals? What was the background? And we can start with you, Leith, if you want.
Okay, sure. So our open data initiative started back in mid to late 2015, and we launched our site in February 2016. The idea of having an open data site came out of a special technology task force that had been formed and came up with several initiatives for our IT group and for the town. Initially, our team consisted of 4 staff members, including myself, and we looked at which data sets were currently being requested and sort of started with the top 10, if you will, of the data for launch. To get us started. And that was a mix of GIS and non-GIS data. We also built a few stories around the data as a showcase to begin with. And that's kind of how we launched. And I believe actually the grand kickoff of the site was during one weekend at a hackathon, if I recall right. It's been a few years and I'm getting older. So, so that's kind of how we got started.
Okay, very clear. And you, Jess?
Yeah, so in Kingston, similar to Leith, actually, my background is in GIS as well. So I was working as a system analyst in the GIS department. We started small with open data. We had basically a web page on our regular public website. And then I built some back-end scripting to be able to prepare the data on a nightly basis. I think we just had 3 data formats to begin with, and it would upload it to the web server and make it available through a regular link. The main reason that we were interested in open data at that point was that we were providing our data to post-secondary education institutions here in town, so a couple of universities and a college. And it was a fair amount of work to package up that data and send it to them and, sort of coordinate that each year. So we were looking for ways to reduce that. We did have our eye on data stories a little bit at that point, though, and that was part of the reason that we picked Opendatasoft, actually, was it was a bit of a platform that we could build out from there. So yeah, we started in about 2015, and we started pretty small, mostly with GIS data, and we've been building it out at the rate of probably about five to 10 data sets per year since then.
Very interesting, and as you said, both of you started small, which is actually a good practice when launching an open data project. Start with a bunch of data sets and observe the usages, the activity on these data sets. And I'm sure that on your data storage project, you did the same, really think about the users, address their needs. But again, I don't want to spoil what you're going to say. And here we'll talk about your data stories project. How did you launch it, and what was the aim of this project? And of course, feel free to share concretely by screen sharing these pages. And we can start maybe with you, Jess.
Sure. So yeah, we had been running Open Data Kingston for about a year, I guess. So it was sort of 2016, maybe early 2017. And we knew through the usage statistics, as you say, on the platform, it was pretty clear that most of our users, unlike the old web page where they really only had the choice to download the data and work with it themselves, something like 70 or 80% of our users were interacting with the platform, looking at things on maps, maybe looking at things in tables, but they weren't actually downloading the data. And we took that to mean that people were using the open data site to get answers to questions, basically. They wanted to know things in their specific area, maybe, or for a specific time frame. And they were accessing the data through Open Data Kingston, but they weren't really downloading it and doing analysis in the way that we thought they might have. So at about the same time, we had another project in the Kingston Fire Department, and they had created an internal dashboard to be able to view their incident data, track response times and things like that. They were using Tableau at the time. So I hooked up with the two analysts who had been building that. We actually hired somebody externally as well to help. And I basically picked up the same data that they were using, filtered it down a little bit, and then created our dashboard. So why don't I show you that now? Let me just do a screen share here. Get this over here. So this is our, whoops, wrong one. Now you can see my emails. So this is the, can everyone see that? I hope it looks like it's good. So this is the first dashboard that we created. We actually had two in the works at the same time, but we're basically pulling fire incident data and then displaying it in a variety of ways here. It is available on a map, so this data was geocoded, and we had a latitude and longitude for each location, and that was something that the fire chief was interested in showing for sure. We also have, of course, the fire stations, and this is sort of the most important part, and I think this is where most of our users get value. They can customize it, they can specialize it, they can look for specifically what they're interested in. So if I'm only interested maybe in incidents that happened in October, you can filter it down. Maybe I'm only interested in medical calls or whatever it is. So we allowed some basic filtering and searching so people can sort of dig into the data and find out what's going on. And I assume this is similar in most other cities as well. Fire data seems to be a very interesting type of data for people. I think it's something that people can connect to, and they see maybe action on their block and there's a fire truck and that kind of thing, and they want to know what happened. So this has been quite a popular data set. The other interesting thing about this dashboard, other than allowing the data, and of course you can link back to the data and you can still download it if that's your interest. But we also included the Twitter feed of the Kingston Fire Department, and they had already done a fair amount of outreach with the public and realized that this was a good way to communicate events that were happening and changes that were happening in the Kingston area. So we included that in the dashboard as well. I'll give you another quick view. This is a pretty similar similar dashboard, but this was the other one that we were working on at the same time. This one came out of a request actually from City Council here. It sounded basically they were hearing from constituents that their service requests to the city on various topics, anything from garbage to taxes to all sorts of stuff. There was a concern that things were taking too long or that it wasn't quite clear where the request had gone. So the request came from a couple of councillors actually to be able to view service request data by district. So that's what we did here, and those are the purple polygons you see on your map there. But it allowed people to choose by district, so they could choose, for example, Sydenham district here, and then they could see service requests in that area. And of course, as you zoom in, it resolves and you can see the actual location. So these are the two data sets and the two dashboards that we launched with originally. Both of them kind of had their own reason. One, the councillors were asking to see, and the second one, the fire chief was interested in showing, sort of telling a story to the public. But this is where we got started, and we hope to launch many more dashboards. We have a homelessness dashboard in the works. We have a building permit dashboard in the works as well. And that's kind of the idea, is to rally around a single concept or a single idea when there's a story to be told. Very often as well, we're sort of already trying to tell that story basically by posting PDFs on the website, which is very much a last century approach in my opinion. So this is the next step for us, and we'll be building more of these to come.
Great. I think permit building dashboard is a great transition for you.
Yes. I'll be showing that one lately. And are we segueing toward me now, Sylvain? Or Jess, did you have more to add?
No, I think I'm done for now. Why don't you go ahead? Yeah.
Okay. I did want to say I do like your fire dashboard. I was gonna say that Cary recently went through their ISO accreditation, and we received a whatever the highest is. I guess a 1 rating. And I had some time prior to the meeting to look over your dashboard, and I know that's a good story to tell, is how well your fire department is meeting those standards of ISO. If that happens to be what happens in Canada, I'm taking it is the same way as it does in the U.S. And I see there you've got the 4.9? That's the time.
Yeah.
Average time to call.
Minutes. Exactly.
So you're hitting it right there on the button. So that should make your citizens feel really, really good.
That was a big part of what the chief was looking to show, for sure. And then the ability to sort of compare. So I know Halloween just passed here, and there's a lot of fire calls on Halloween. So being able to tell that story in data was one of the examples he used in the first meeting, actually.
Cool. Yeah, I wanted to add that. I thought that was great.
Thank you. Yeah.
And we do similar things too internally with our fire department, as far as they use Power BI instead of Tableau to do a lot of their reporting, and did that around their ISO accreditation. But as far as our stories go, initially, the way I recall it, or the way I remember it, we were going to try to produce stories kind of on a regular basis, but it didn't quite work out that way. While we do have some stories, some of them initially turned out to be kind of, if you will, seasonal. So one of our first stories was like about how well the town of Cary here in the South does snow removal, which you wouldn't think would be a big story, but down here in the South, if we get just a snowflake, we all lose our mind and decide to make French toast out of bread and milk for whatever reason. That flies off the shelves, and everybody can get a good chuckle out of that. But we've tried to build stories that kind of showcase some of our amenities in the town, and sheds light on some social issues such as the opioid crisis, if you will. So I'm going to, and also community outreach, I'm going to take this opportunity to show you a couple of dashboards, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And so there you go. So talking about sharing amenities, and I'm gonna, I better leave that there. If I move it, I didn't realize that. This is showing off of our greenways, and we just had, I believe it was our 40th anniversary for our greenways here at the town of Cary. Now, while I don't have a lot of the data showing here, I like some of Jess's dashboards or data stories. This is a data story. It tells more of a story about the greenways and uses the data to supplement it. So here we're looking at the percentage of the greenways that we have planned, how many are currently existing, how many are proposed, and how many we actually have funding to build. So every year we do capital projects and get funding to continue to connect greenways and do several studies to figure out what's the most bang for our buck whenever we do complete a portion of a greenway. And we have some nice photos here and talk about other things as far as like bike and hike, and talk about how much the greenways are used and what the population is within a quarter of a mile. Some really nice statistics here. Also highlight the American Tobacco Trail, which is an old railroad bed that has been created, and you could even take horses out there and ride, which is kind of nice. And then lastly down here it's showing how long our different greenways are, along with their surface types. And so a little factoid down here that we have over 80 miles of greenways, and how much parkland we have. So that's kind of a nice showcase, in addition to what we may have on our web page. So that's one story. This is our opioid story. I know a year or two ago this was kind of a big news story, and so we partnered with a company out of MIT called BioBots to do some wastewater sampling to figure out what was going on around our town as far as opioid usage. And so this is the story that tells that. And then how some of the how we've been doing outreach and collecting of old medications and different things like that to show how this is affecting and how this is helping. And then this is the 2018 stormwater monitoring project that we did, where we set up different sites around town and started collecting that data. And then the actions that we took. So that's kind of around that, educating the public of what we're trying to do to help with this. And then this tells a little bit more about what we had done, and then to learn more. I did want to mention too, also another one about outreach. This is the one that we have about the fire department and what they do as far as education. And this is our ongoing data about how we've done community outreach over the last few years. And as you can see, COVID in 2020 actually put a big dent in that. So that's interesting to see.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of the different training things that they have done or activities.
These are great, Leith. I didn't look too closely before the session. I think I just want to say as well, I think this is very much the direction we're going to be taking from now. A lot of the data work that we've done has been, well, like folks like myself, people who are data minded and looking for analysis. But I think this is hitting the nail on the head, I guess. This is what people want to see. This tells a story. It's in a format that it's a web page format, maybe something they're a little more familiar with seeing. And we're working with our comms department as well to get them to help write some of the copy and provide photographs and things. This is really great.
Yeah, so maybe more infographic-y, if you will.
That's a good word. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's the word we've been throwing around as well.
And lastly, so as to not take up too much time, I'll just show the latest one that we've been working on, which is the with a little help. I won't say from who, but with a little help. This is our Open Data Building Permit dashboard. So this is we've recently, just to give you a little bit of a background, I believe we had maybe a redesign of our web page that caused some issues with let's say citizens, let's say realtors, people who are interested in finding out what has been done to a home that either they're getting ready to sell or getting ready to buy. So this allows them to go out and look for that data. And it gives a little story again about our annual permit activity. So how many we've received. You can flip it over and you can see each of the years. Or if you wanted to go back and look at, say, 2016, it would change the number so that we could see what percentage were single family homes and how many are actual new building permits versus just retrofits, if you will, like somebody may be changing out a hot water heater or adding a screened-in porch or a deck or something like that. And that also gives us a heads up for what kind of inspectors that we need to be looking for in the future, possibly. Cary's kind of what I would call sort of a post-industrial town, if you will. Most of our area has been built out, and now we just have infill and redevelopment to worry about. So in the future, we would think that we would see less new home starts and buildings versus other things, and that would be kind of interesting to just keep a lookout over the next few years. And then down here we see our permit activity, and we can see single trade, what's going on there, and this was for 2016. And then down here we've got a nice interactive map that allow us to find where building permits are, or either to filter them out by typing information in here. If I just click on this one here, it automatically filters the map so you can see what's going on there, which is kind of nice. Or if I wanted to look for, let's see, decks, or if I type deck, what happens? Let's see, so there we go. So covered porch, screen porch. Some of them, not sure. I better quit. Live demo, not good. But that's kind of the gist of it. And we did provide another link because we're only keeping 6 or 7 years worth of data out here. It is a rather large data set. We did provide a link back to our mothership, if you will, to our main systems where they can go back and find older permits that would be back prior to that 7 years. And I guess I'll quit here because there's some other things I could say, but I think we'll address that further on. So please excuse me if I took too much time showing things.
No problem, no problem. Very interesting to see what you achieved, and very impressed. I think there are some common points between your projects, so that's interesting. The fact that sometimes it started with some internal dashboard requests, and that you decided also to open it to the public because it was obviously interesting. It is linked also, but on top of the dashboard and the visualization, you chose the topic in itself is very important. You chose some key topics like fire or permits or greenways. So this is interesting as well. And we see on your dashboard that also you try to, and you said it, Jess, to have some comparison angles so that people can compare, and we see it also on the permit dashboard, a year versus another one. So very interesting. And actually, it is echoing a question we have from Nicholas. How, and I will ask it because it's quite linked to what you presented. How do you usually determine which topics are used for the data stories? Did you have sometimes requests by your citizens?
If you don't mind me starting out, Jess.
Go for it, yeah.
I would say yes. This particular one for the building permits, that is a I would say a direct outcry, if you will. We also, Jess, you had that dashboard with the citizen requests. So we have something similar that we haven't built anything for yet, 311, that we've just started in the last year or so. So when something comes in from Opendatasoft, whenever we get an email from Opendatasoft, it goes straight into our 311 system and creates a ticket. So we can go back and look to see how many requests we've had for open data, and by far the building permits has been the one. not sure where this gentleman is living, but I think in most areas, and Jess, you may be able to touch on it too, and where you're at in Canada, but the housing market, it seems like no matter where you at, it's just hot right now, and you can't put in a offer on a house before it's gone off the market. In my neighborhood, for sale signs don't even get in the yard. They go so fast, so people really want to know quickly what's going on with the home as far as like what improvements have been done. Was this permitted or not permitted? Because you don't want to buy a deck or buy a house that has a what looks like a wonderful deck on it that may not have ever gotten a permit. Some liabilities there possibly. So so yeah, that's definitely public outcry as far as that goes. Is yes, we get that input to figure it out. So hopefully I answered that.
It's a good question, and I think both of the examples that I showed were very much sort of top down. There was discussions that happened at the high level of management, and a decision was made that there's a story to be told here. But I also echo what Leith said. I was taking part, not so much hearing directly from citizens, although we do have a little bit of outreach with a few folks here in town. But I was taking part in a couple of user groups or meeting groups, basically municipalities and organizations here in Canada. We would meet, a couple of times a year and discuss what was popular, discuss what people were interested in, which data sets were getting a lot of traction, what their plans were for, the following year, things like that. And for the first little while, and even today, that very much guides our efforts, because you're right, people are interested in basically the same things in different places. And as you say, the housing market is definitely an interesting one. That's also why I mentioned the homelessness dashboard, because of course, during Kingston, there was a lot of visibility around issues of homelessness here. A lot of people were basically what used to be spread all over the town, were sort of condensed into one place so that they could be safe and services could be provided and that sort of thing. So there was a discussion happening, and it was happening on social media. We were hearing about it, and I echo what Leith said as well. By looking at our service requests, we could see that there was a lot of people contacting the city around that topic. So that was why we focused in to try and we are still building that dashboard. But no, we haven't heard, except for a few exceptions actually, and I will mention. When we were first getting started with open data, I actually partook in I think they called it a user group, but it was basically a bunch of data-minded folks here in town. It was just before we were having a municipal election, and there was a lot of talk in the press around budgeting and how the budget was built and where Kingston was spending its money. So a group of people, I think there was 3 or 4 people, were interested in participatory budgeting. They pulled together a workshop, and they had some, professors from the university and some people like myself from the city, various other interested parties. And it was pretty much just an open discussion. I think we met for about half a day and talked about this very topic. What are the things that people want to know, but the city is not providing, or maybe not doing a great job providing? So we do hope to do more of that kind of stuff in the future. I think it is really important to hear from the population, to hear from the people who will be using. It's maybe not quite as good to look after the fact and see how they're using a product or using a dashboard. It's much better if you can get out in front of it and learn what it is that people are after. I can give another example of that. We participated in a hackathon actually with Queen's University. This was maybe 2 or 3 years ago now. And just kind of offhandedly, I happened to mention that we had just received some LiDAR data of the city. We had basically a truck-mounted LiDAR drive around the city and collect that 3D point cloud information. And I was totally overwhelmed by how excited the students were by this. They wanted to get their hands on it. They wanted to do this, that, and the other. They had all these big ideas, of course. So we tried to move pretty quickly to provide that data on open data. And I think the same applies for stories. When you identify that there's an interest, that there's a topic that people want to read about. For us, it was fire or service requests, but it's probably different in different areas. There's a certain element of sort of striking while the iron's hot as well, jumping on that topic and maybe using some of the news cycle that's already happening or discussions on social media and trying to tap into that and producing a story that people want to see. So it's a really good question. It is tough to know, how people are interested in data. Of course, they never use the word data as well. Of course, that's a very nerd view of the world. But yeah, it's a really good question. And so far we've been top down, but yes, we're looking at building more like a suggestion suggestion portal, something where people can suggest the data sets and maybe vote on other people's suggestions so that we can compare and say, oh yeah, we've had 50 requests in the last year to see building permits, probably time to make a building permit dashboard, right? So it's a very good question.
Yeah, interesting to have your point of views. And another question from the audience that is quite related, actually. A question from Carol from the OSBM in North Carolina. Do you track analytics on how long people spend on your dashboards, or more widely on your portals? And do you happen sometimes to use this feedback to adjust the amount of information or some charts, for example?
That's a tricky question. Maybe
I'll let
maybe
you start on that.
Thank you. Yeah, no, to be perfectly honest, right now we're not doing quite as much with analytics as I would like to. We have hooked up, excuse me, we have hooked up our open data portal to Google Analytics, so we do have the capability to track the amount of time that people are spending on a web page. We also have I can't remember the name of the tool right now, but even the ability to track where on a given page people are moving their cursor and how long they're spending and how often are they scrolling, that kind of thing. So we definitely have the ability. We haven't gone that far with it though, and I see in your question you say we struggle with only getting people's attention for less than 2 minutes. I think that's the state of things out here. We live in a information overload kind of world, and there's so many web pages, so much competing, so many things competing for your attention, of course. So we tried to keep that as a central sort of design tenet when we were building this. We knew that we weren't going to get people's attention for very long. We sort of had a minute or 2 minutes in our mind, and we were trying to design things so that there was as few clicks as possible. We've seen that on our public website as well. If it's a topic that we know people are very interested in, if we bury it 2 or 3 pages deep, it's not going to get nearly the same traffic as if we have it near the top of the site and you can get to it in 5 or 10 seconds kind of thing. So ease of use, I think, is really what we're talking about here, and yeah, just the information overload of our world and how much time people have for this stuff. So it's a really good question, and I think as we build out our platform, we want to get deeper into those analytics and start to understand maybe how the dashboards are performing against each other, what type of dashboards. And like I mentioned earlier as well, we're very interested in having more of a story or an infographic type dashboard, kind of long form, where you would sort of start at the top, work your way down to the bottom, and then there's opportunities along the way maybe to link out to a Twitter account or to show a photograph, and you sort of draw people through your story and then maybe try and grab their attention with a couple of nuggets along the way. So it's a really good question, but it's not an easy one to answer, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was going to say, both of us being in GIS, and I'm taking it you probably use the leader in geographic information technology, which would be ESRI. And ESRI has something very similar called story maps, and it's kind of the same thing. Yeah. So I think you can compare what a story map is to a data story. The emphasis is on story, but using the data to tell that story. So getting back to the question about the analytics, not that I'm going to try to sidestep it, quite honestly, not so much right now. I'm not going to say we wouldn't do that in the future. I have all ideas. We probably are hooked up to Google Analytics, and I know that ODS provides some analytics as far as the data sets go. So you can see what your popular data sets are. And, as I'd said before, our overwhelmingly popular one, the building data, the building permit data, crash data from the police department. Those are another one that seems to be used a lot, probably by lawyers. But
yeah, no, actually, it's funny you mentioned that. I just got an email this morning from a citizen who was looking for exactly that data and was trying to interpret it. So it's a popular one for sure.
Yeah. So currently, I would have to say honestly, not very much. But I think it is important to do a certain amount of that, just to make your site better and more relevant. I know right now, Sylvain, with the EU, there's a whole lot of things around privacy, and I think there is sort of a backlash now with people not feeling that of being tracked so much. especially with some of these stories coming out of Facebook and other things. So while it is good, good doesn't always come from it. So I'll leave it at that.
No, that's a really good point, though. Not everyone is comfortable with data and happy to see data maybe in such a raw format, right? And I think that's one of the other powers of data stories is that you can create context around it. You can explain, here are the numbers, here's our response times or whatever it is, but also here's the bigger context. Here's why we're telling you this, right? And that's something, honestly, we need to get better at here at the City of Kingston.
And I think that segues into our next question, doesn't it, Sylvain?
That was
yeah,
by accident, I
perfect
swear.
transition. Yeah. And also interesting because you're talking a lot about geodata, and on your examples we saw lots of maps, and definitely this is also a way to engage communities. What we realize is that when there is geodata, the interest and the activity on data sets is always more important. So good point to keep in mind. Maybe a quick question on something you start evoking a little bit in delivering these projects. Did you encounter some problems to solve, some difficulties to overcome to deliver these data stories?
Yeah. Do you want to start, Leith?
Yeah, I can. I forget who has the talking stick.
The digital talking stick.
Yeah. So yes, some issues. So I'll immediately go back to the building permits. The building permits starts out as non-GIS data. We that is out of a older system, if you will, that's like a mainframe. So that while we do have some coordinates for our locations in there or addresses, we have to basically take everything out of the system, geocode it, attach coordinates to it, and then go back and update that system. So we don't always do that as often, and we're getting ready to switch to the cloud version of that, and at some point may even switching systems to something that may be a little more modern, if you will. So the problem was whenever we started pulling that data for this particular data story, not everything had coordinates. So if it doesn't have coordinates, you can't map it. And if you can't map it, you can't see where it's at. And so that data loses some of its value by not having those. So we also use a different software. It's called FME from a company in Canada, SAFE. Yeah, GIS user over there knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh, I love FME, absolutely.
And so we take that data and run it through a FME process before we push it, or before it's pulled into the open data portal, if you will. So we do some massaging of the data there to help. Another thing I will say is I may have a great idea for a story, but one thing we struggle with a lot is data ownership as well as data stewardship. And I can have a great story, but unless I'm the owner or the steward of that data, do I have the right to take that data, even though it's, say, the organization's data, without buy-in and showing it up there? Some people may have anxiety about their data being scrutinized by the public, and there may be nothing wrong with it. But in their eyes, we may need to look over this data with a fine-tooth comb to see exactly what story could be told, if you will. A lot of, like with our police information that we release for the open data portal, we have to be very careful with what types of crimes we put out and how much information we put out. So that's a bigger issue there, but the same thing. People are always a little hesitant sometimes about showing the data, so we have to overcome that. And Jess, I'll let you talk a little bit on that.
I would completely, absolutely, yeah, no, I would completely agree, and that's almost always when I'm having meetings with data owners and people who, are responsible for the data, that's usually the first thing I hear, and that's usually the last thing I hear in the meeting as well. They're very concerned about the optics. The other thing which I find interesting, and this is a lot of my job, honestly, is kind of talking people through it and explaining a little bit what open data is and how people are likely to react to open data. There's a lot of fear, I think it's fair to say, around bad data. We can't release this data set because, we know that there's some records in there that aren't right, or we don't trust them, or it was done by Joe before he left and nobody really know what Joe did, or whatever it is. And the story that I tell, and I feel like I go blue in the face repeating myself on this, honestly, but it's the truth, is that the public doesn't care. The public actually, from most people's experience, and I'm talking about cities and organizations who are sort of 5 or 10 years ahead of us in doing this, the public is fine with people releasing quote unquote bad data that has problems with it, as long as you improve. As long as you take that as a starting point and show, oh yeah, you were right, data from that year was shifted, or there was some sort of problem with it, and then you improve on that. And that kind of blows people's minds, I think, is that they're so used to the kind of relationship with especially constituents in a municipal kind of setting, where they're used to getting the angry phone call. And they sort of think of it in the context of, oh, somebody's going to call up and say, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is not right. And the reality is that putting it on a web page, showing, warts and all, or whatever, to say that there are some problems with this data, and we know that, and then using that as a starting point, it can actually be a really good demonstration of transparency. You can show, look, maybe our building permits weren't very clear 5 years ago, but look where they are today. And we've improved our program. We're being more efficient or more clear or better at communicating. And so we're talking about transparency, basically. And I think that's one of the most powerful things of open data in general, but definitely around open data stories, because you can supply that context. You can say, and we do that on some of our data sets, we say right up front, here's a disclaimer. We know that there are these problems, and if you're having trouble interpreting, you can contact this person. It's an opportunity to start a discussion, basically. Whereas if you just kind of post a PDF on a website, it's very static and there's no opportunity to change and improve, maybe. And that's when you get the angry phone calls. So we haven't, I don't think since we've launched our open data story, we've really had too many people from the community angry at us or upset with data problems. They're quite happy to point them out and say, look, I don't think this is right, and maybe you want to take a closer look at this. And then we're able to react to that and email them back and say, thank you very much for bringing this to our attention. So actually those things that people think of as negative and are scared about, the optics of, can actually be turned into a positive thing. So I'm telling this story a lot to data owners, and I completely echo what Leith was saying. It's a number one concern for sure.
Thanks a lot for all these elements, and really happy to have this discussion, pleasant and thoughtful discussion with you. I will ask maybe one last question, because we have 3 or 4 minutes left. A classic one. You already evoked it a little bit. What's next for your open data projects? Coming data.
Sure,
data stories,
I'll start with that one if that's okay, Leith.
Yeah.
So basically more of the same. I think it's fair to say over the next couple of years, we sort of aim to release about 2 or 3 new data sets per quarter. So we've got building permits coming. We're looking at adding more financial information as well. We've got capital stuff at the moment, but more sort of operational budget information. And more data stories as well. And like I said earlier, we really want to focus on more of sort of a personal data story, things that have photographs, things that link out to social media. I should mention social media as well. We're very interested in more engagement with our users. So we want to have, in the form of surveys, but also just having discussions, getting on social media and asking people, what do they want to see? What do they like? What do they not like? So we're going to continue to do that. And so more of the same, I think, for the next couple of years. And I would say more non-GIS data. We really started in the spatial realm, a lot of maps, because that was sort of what we already had on our webpage. But we're going to be focusing more on non-spatial data for the next year or 2.
I think for us, while I'm working on this, I would like to go back and maybe refresh some of the existing stories that we have. The homepage, make it possibly seasonal, if you will, because there's always some seasonal stories that you could tell. I would like to maybe show, since I talked about earlier about our new 311 initiative. Of course, I don't own that data, but I would love to see that be something that we would push out later on to show the citizens about how much we do engage, kind of like what you had, Jess, with the citizens, and look at it on a council level, because your councilmen always want to know the heartbeat of their district, and to keep informed. So that's kind of where I would look, I believe. So hopefully that's a good answer.
That's perfect. Yeah, for sure. That's perfect, and perfect timing. I think we are arriving at the end of the discussion. Thank you very much. That was really pleasant and full of life.